Chapter 5 The Pandora Part 3 of the Eventful History of the Mutiny and Piratical Seizure of HMS Bounty, its Cause and Consequences. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Haley Flagg. The Eventful History of the Mutiny and Piratical Seizure of HMS Bounty by Sir John Barrow, Chapter 5, Part 3. The treatment of these unhappy men was almost as bad at Batavia as in the Pandora, being closely confined in irons in the castle, and fed on very bad provisions. And the hardships they endured on their passage to England in Dutch ships were very severe, having, as he says, slept on nothing but hard boards on wet canvas, without any bed, for 17 months, always subsisting on short allowance of execrable provisions, and without any clothes for some time, except such as the charity of 2 young men in the ship supplied him with. He had during his confinement at Batavia learned to make straw hats, and finished several with both his hands in fetters, which he sold for half a crown apiece, and with the produce of these he procured a suit of coarse clothes, in which, with a cheerful and light heart, notwithstanding all his sufferings, he arrived at Portsmouth. How he preserved his health under the dreadful sufferings he endured, and in 8 months' close confinement in a hot climate, is quite wonderful. On the 2nd day after the arrival of the Gorgon at Spithead, the prisoners were transferred to the Hector, commanded by Captain, the late Admiral Sir George Montague, where they were treated with the greatest humanity, and every indulgence allowed that could with propriety be extended to men in their unhappy situation, until the period when they were to be arraigned before the competent authority, and put on their trials for mutiny and piracy, which did not take place until the month of September. In this period of anxious and awful suspense, a most interesting correspondence was carried on between this unfortunate youth and his numerous friends, which exhibits the character of himself and the whole family in the most amiable and affectionate colours, and in a more particular manner of that adorable creature his sister Nessie, who in one of her letters accounts for the peculiar warmth of her attachment and expressions by their being nearly of the same age, and engaged in the same pursuits, whether of study or amusement in their juvenile years. The poor mother, on hearing of his arrival, thus addresses her unfortunate son. Isle of Man, June 29th, 1792. O my ever dearly beloved and long-lost son, with what anxiety have I waited for this period! I have counted the days, hours, and even minutes, since I first heard of the horrid and unfortunate mutiny, which has so long deprived me of my dearest boy. But now the happy time is come when, though I cannot have the unspeakable pleasure of seeing and embracing you, yet I hope we may be allowed to correspond. Surely there can be nothing improper in a liberty of this sort between an affectionate mother and her dutiful and beloved son, who, I am perfectly convinced, was never guilty of the crime he has been suspected of by those who did not know his worth and truth. I have not the least doubt but that the all-gracious God, who of his good providence has protected you so long, and brought you safe through so many dangers and difficulties, will still protect you, and at your trial make your innocence appear as clear as the light. All your letters have come safe to me, and to my very dear good Nessie. Ah, Peter, with what real joy did we all receive them, and how happy are we that you are now safe in England! I will endeavour, my dearest lad, to make your present situation as comfortable as possible, for so affectionate and good a son deserves my utmost attention. Nessie has written to our faithful and kind friend Mr. Hayward of Plymouth for his advice, whether it would be proper for her to come up to you. If he consents to her so doing, not a moment shall be lost, and how happy shall I be when she is with you! Such a sister as she is! Oh, Peter, she is a most valuable girl, etc. On the same day, this most valuable girl thus writes, End note 21. My dearest and most beloved brother, thanks to that almighty Providence which has so miraculously preserved you, your fond, anxious, and till now miserable Nessie is at last permitted to address the object of her tenderest affection in England. Oh, my admirable, my heroic boy, what have we felt on your account, yet how small, how infinitely trifling was the misery of our situation, when compared with the horror of yours!
Let me now, however, with confidence hope that the God of all mercies has not so long protected you in vain, but will at length crown your fortitude and pious resignation to his will with that peace and happiness you so richly merit. How blessed did your delightful and yet dreadful letter from Batavia make us all! Surely, my beloved boy, you could not for a moment imagine we ever supposed you guilty of the crime of mutiny. No, no, believe me, no earthly power could have persuaded us that it was possible for you to do anything inconsistent with strict honour and duty. So well did we know your amiable, steady principles, that we were assured your reasons for staying behind would turn out such as you represent them, and I firmly trust that Providence will at length restore you to those dear and affectionate friends who can know no happiness until they are blessed with your loved society. Take care of your precious health, my angelic boy. I shall soon be with you. I have written to Mr. Heywood, your and our excellent friend and protector, for his permission to go to you immediately, which my uncle Heywood, without first obtaining it, would not allow, fearing lest any precipitate step might injure you at present, and I only wait the arrival of his next letter to fly into your arms. Oh, my best beloved Peter, how I anticipate the rapture of that moment! For, alas, I have no joy, no happiness, but in your beloved society, and no hopes, no fears, no wishes, but for you.
Mr. Heywood's sisters all addressed their unfortunate brother in the same affectionate but less impassioned strain, and a little trait of good feeling is mentioned, on the part of an old female servant, that shows what a happy and attached family the Heywoods were, previous to the melancholy affair in which their boy became entangled. Mrs. Heywood says, "My good honest Birkett is very well, and says your safe return has made her more happy than she has been for these 42 years she has been in our family." And Miss Nessy tells him, "Poor Birkett, the most faithful and worthiest of servants, desires me to tell you that she almost dies with joy at the thought of your safe arrival in England. What agony, my dear boy, has she felt on your account! Her affection for you knows no bounds, and her misery has indeed been extreme, but she still lives to bless your virtues." The poor prisoner thus replies from His Majesty's ship Hector to his beloved sisters all: "This day I had the supreme happiness of your long-expected letters, and I am not able to express the pleasure and joy they afforded me. At the sight of them my spirits, low and dejected, were at once exhilarated. My heart had long and greatly suffered from my impatience to hear of those most dear to me, and was tossed and tormented by the storms of fearful conjecture. But they are now subsided, and my bosom has at length attained that long-lost serenity and calmness it once enjoyed. For you may believe me when I say it never yet has suffered any disquiet from my own misfortunes, but from a truly anxious solicitude for, and desire to hear of, your welfare. God be thanked, you still entertain such an opinion of me as I will flatter myself I have deserved. But why do I say so? Can I make myself too worthy the affectionate praises of such amiable sisters? Oh, my Nessy, it grieves me to think I must be under the necessity, however heart-breaking to myself, of desiring you will relinquish your most affectionate design of coming to see me. It is too long and tedious a journey, and even on your arrival you would not be allowed the wished-for happiness, both to you and myself, of seeing, much less conversing with, your unfortunate brother. The rules of the service are so strict that prisoners are not permitted to have any communication with female relations. Thus even the sight of, and conversation with, so truly affectionate a sister is for the present denied me. The happiness of such an interview let us defer till a time which, please God, will arrive, when it can be enjoyed with more freedom and unobserved by the gazing eyes of an inquisitive world, which in my present place of confinement would of course not be the case. I am very happy to hear that poor old Birkett is still alive. Remember me to her, and tell her not to heave aback until God grants me the pleasure of seeing her. And now, my dear Nessy, cease to anticipate the happiness of personal communication with your poor but resigned brother, until wished-for freedom removes the indignant shackles I now bear, from the feet of your fond and most affectionate brother, P.H. In a subsequent letter to his sister, he says, "Let us at present be resigned to our fate, contented with this sort of communication, and be thankful to God for having even allowed us that happiness. For be assured the present confinement is liberty, compared with what it has been for the 15 months last past." On the 15th of July, Commodore Paisley addressed the following business-like letter to Miss Heywood. I received your letter, my dearest Nessie, with the enclosure, her brother's narrative, but did not choose to answer it until I had made a thorough investigation, that is, seen personally all the principal evidences, which has ever since occupied my whole thoughts and time. I have also had some letters from himself, and notwithstanding he must still continue in confinement, every attention and indulgence possible is granted him by Captain Montague of the Hector, who is my particular friend. I have no doubt of the truth of your brother's narrative. The master, boatswain, gunner, and carpenter, late of the Bounty, I have seen, and have the pleasure to assure you that they are all favourable and corroborate what he says. That fellow, Captain Edwards, whose inhuman rigour of confinement I shall never forget, I have likewise seen. He cannot deny that Peter avowed himself late of the Bounty when he came voluntarily aboard. This is a favourable circumstance. I have been at the Admiralty, and read over all the depositions taken and sent home by Bligh and his officers from Batavia, likewise the court-martial on himself, in none of which appears anything against Peter. As soon as Lieutenant Heywood arrives with the remainder of the Pandora's crew, the court-martial is to take place. I shall certainly attend, and we must have an able counsellor to assist, for I will not deceive you, my dear Nessie. However favourable circumstances may appear, our martial law is severe. By the tenor of it, the man who stands neuter is equally guilty with him who lifts his arm against his captain in such cases. His extreme youth and his delivering himself up are the strong points of his defence. Adieu, my dearest Nessie. Present my love to your mother and sisters, and rest assured of my utmost exertions to extricate your brother. Your affectionate uncle, T. Paisley. This excellent man did not stop here. Knowing that sea officers have a great aversion from counsel, he writes to say, a friend of mine, Mr. Graham, who has been secretary to the different admirals on the Newfoundland station for these 12 years, and consequently has acted as judge-advocate at court-martials all that time, has offered me to attend you. He has a thorough knowledge of the service, uncommon abilities, and is a very good lawyer. He has already had most of the evidences with him. Adieu, my young friend. Keep up your spirits, and rest assured I shall be watchful for your good. My heart will be more at ease if I can get my friend Graham to go down, than if you were attended by the first counsel in England. End note 22. Mr. Graham accordingly attended, and was of the greatest service at the trial. Nessie Heywood, end note 23, having in one of her letters inquired of her brother how tall he was, and having received information on this point, expressed some surprise that he was not taller. And so, he replies, you are surprised I am not taller? Ah, Nessie, let me ask you this. Suppose the 2 last years of your growth had been retarded by close confinement, nearly deprived of all kinds of necessary aliment, shut up from the all-cheering light of the sun for the space of 5 months, and never suffered to breathe the fresh air, an enjoyment which Providence denies to none of his creatures, during all that time, and without any kind of exercise to stretch and supple your limbs, besides many other inconveniences which I will not pain you by mentioning. How tall should you have been, my dear sister? Answer, 4 feet nothing. But enough of nonsense. Nessie Heywood had expressed a strong desire to see her brother, but was told the rules of the service would not allow it. Also, that it would agitate him, when he sought to be cool and collected, to meet his approaching trial. That was quite enough. But as for myself, she says, no danger, no fatigue, no difficulties would deter me. I have youth and health, and excellent natural spirits. These and the strength of my affection would support me through it all. If I were not allowed to see you, yet being in the same place which contains you, would be joy inexpressible. I will not, however, any longer desire it, but will learn to imitate your fortitude and patience. Mr. Heywood of Maristow and his daughter, Mrs. Bertie, had intimated the same thing. These excellent people, from the moment of young Heywood's arrival, had shown him every kindness, supplied him with money, and, what was better, with friends, who could give him the best advice. To this worthy lady, Miss Nessie Heywood thus addresses herself. Overwhelmed with sensations of gratitude and pleasure which she is too much agitated to express, permit me, dearest madam, at my mamma's request, to offer you her and our most sincere acknowledgments for your invaluable letter, which, from the detention of the packet, she did not receive till yesterday. By a letter from my beloved brother, of the same date, we are informed that Mr. Larkham, who I suppose to be the gentleman you mention having sent to see him, has been on board the Hector, and has kindly offered him the most salutary advice relative to his present situation,
for which allow me to request you will present him our best thanks. He also speaks with every expression a grateful heart can dictate of your excellent father's goodness in providing for all his wants, even before he could have received any letters from us to that purpose. Ah, my dear madam, how truly characteristic is this of kind friendship with which he has ever honoured our family! But my beloved Peter does not know that Mr. Heywood has a daughter whose generosity is equal to his own, and whose amiable compassion for his sufferings it will be as impossible for us to forget as it is to express the admiration and gratitude it has inspired. It would, I am convinced, be unnecessary, as well as a very bad compliment to you, madam, were I to presume to point out anything particular to be done for our poor boy, as I have not the least doubt your goodness and kind intention have long ago rendered every care of that sort on our part unnecessary. I shall only add that my mamma begs every wish he forms may be granted, and sure I am he will not desire a single gratification that can be deemed in the smallest degree improper. In one of my brother's letters, dated the 23rd, he hints that he shall not be permitted to see any of his relations till his trial is over, and that he therefore does not expect us. I have, however, written to Mr. Heywood, without whose approbation I would by no means take any step, for permission to go to him. If it is absolutely impossible for me to see him, though in the presence of witnesses, yet even that prohibition, cruel as it is, I could bear with patience, provided I might be near him, to see the ship in which he at present exists, to behold those objects which, perhaps at the same moment, attracts his notice, to breathe the same air which he breathes. My dearest madam, these are inestimable gratifications, and will convey sensations of rapture and delight to the fond bosom of a sister, which it is far, very far beyond my power to describe. Besides, the anxiety and impatience produced by the immense distance which now separates us from him, and the uncertainty attending the packet, render it difficult and sometimes impossible to hear of him so often as we would wish. And, may I not add, though heaven in its mercy forbid it, for alas, the bare idea is too dreadful, yet it is in the scale of possibility, that some accident might happen to deprive us of my dearest brother. How insupportably bitter would then be our reflections, for having omitted the opportunity, when it was in our power, of administering comfort and consolation to him in person. For these reasons, I earnestly hope Mr. Heywood will not judge it improper to comply with my request, and shall wait with eager impatience the arrival of his next letter. Think not, my dear madam, that it is want of confidence in your care and attention which makes me solicitous to be with my beloved brother. Be assured we are all as perfectly easy in that respect as if we were on the spot, but I am convinced you will pardon the dictates of an affection which an absence of 5 years, rendered still more painful by his sufferings, has heightened almost to a degree of adoration. I shall, with your permission, take the liberty of enclosing a letter to my brother, which I leave open for perusal, and at the same time request your pardon for mentioning you to him, in such terms as I am apprehensive will wound the delicacy which ever accompanies generosity like yours. But indeed, my dearest madam, I cannot, must not, suffer my beloved boy to remain in ignorance of that worth and excellence which has prompted you to become his kind protectress. I have the honour to be, with every sentiment of gratitude, etc., 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 Nessie Heywood. Among the numerous friends that interested themselves in the fate of this unhappy youth was his uncle, Colonel Holwell. The testimony he bears to his excellent character is corroborated by all who knew him while a boy at home. About a fortnight before the trial, he writes to him thus: 21st of August, 1792. My very dear Peter, I have this day received yours of the 18th, and am happy to find by its contents that, notwithstanding your long and cruel confinement, you still preserve your health and write in good spirits. Preserve it, my dear boy, awful as the approaching period must be, even to the most innocent, but from which all who know you have not a doubt of your rising as immaculate as a newborn infant. I have known you from your cradle, and have often remarked with pleasure and surprise the many assiduous instances, far beyond your years, you have given of filial duty and paternal affection to the best of parents, and to brothers and sisters who doted on you. Your education has been the best, and from these considerations alone, without the very clear evidence of your own testimony, I would as soon believe the Archbishop of Canterbury would set fire to the city of London, as suppose you could, directly or indirectly, join in such an absurd piece of business. Truly sorry am I that my state of health will not permit me to go down to Portsmouth to give this testimony publicly before that respectable tribunal where your country's laws have justly ordained you must appear. But consider this as the touchstone, my dear boy, by which your worth must be known. 6 years in the navy myself, and 28 years a soldier, I flatter myself my judgment will not prove erroneous. That power, my dear Peter, of whose grace and mercy you seem to have so just a sense, will not now forsake you. Your dear aunt is, as must be expected, in such a trying situation, but more from your present sufferings than any apprehension of what is to follow, etc. With similar testimonies and most favourable auguries from Commodore Paisley, the Reverend Dr. Scott of the Isle of Man, and others, young Heywood went to his long and anxiously expected trial, which took place on the 12th of September, and continued to the 18th of that month. Mrs. Heywood had been anxious that Erskine and Mingay should be employed as counsel, but Mr. Graham, whom Commodore Paisley had so highly recommended, gave his best assistance, as did also Mr. Const, who had been retained, for which the Commodore expresses his sorrow, as sea officers, he says, have great aversion to lawyers. Mr. Peter Heywood assigns a better reason. In a letter to his sister Mary, he says that counsel to a naval prisoner is of no effect, and as they are not allowed to speak, their eloquence is not of the least efficacy. I request, therefore, you will desire my dear mother to revoke the letter she has been so good to write, to retain Mr. Erskine and Mr. Mingay, and to forbear putting herself to so great and needless an expense, from which no good can accrue. No, no, Mary, it is not the same as a trial on shore. It would then be highly requisite, but in this case I alone must fight my own battle. And I think my telling the truth undisguised, in a plain, short, and concise manner, is as likely to be deserving the victory as the most elaborate eloquence of a Cicero upon the same subject. At this anxious moment many painfully interesting letters passed to and from the family in the Isle of Man. The last letter from his beloved Nessy, previous to the awful event, thus concludes: "May that Almighty Providence, whose tender care has hitherto preserved you, be still your powerful protector. May he instil into the hearts of your judges every sentiment of justice, generosity, and compassion. May hope, innocence, and integrity be your firm support, and liberty, glory, and honour your just reward. May all good angels guard you from even the appearance of danger, and may you at length be restored to us, the delight, the pride of your adoring friends, and the sole happiness and felicity of that fond heart which animates the bosom of my dear Peter's most faithful and truly affectionate sister, in H." End of Chapter 5, Part 3. Recording by Haley Flagg of Texas.